All right. Dream.
Hi.
Dream. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Southwest Michigan in this small town called Hager Shore. And it's like a tourist town. There's nothing going on there, like in the wintertime whatsoever. And in the summertime, there was big houses everywhere that filled up with rich tourists from Chicago.
Hmm.
We're probably, it took me maybe like 5 minutes to walk to Michigan. So it was a quiet town, nothing going on there. And that's where I lived with my parents, both of them, my mother and my father, until I was 7. And when we lived there, I guess I have to kind of describe the land that we lived on because it was really beautiful. It was a wooded, really beautiful woodland with a marsh. So on this side, you see nothing but flowers and trees and ravines and shaded trees. And this side, you have like the marsh where there's like lily pads and flowers and all that types of stuff.
Sounds wonderful.
So it's beautiful. It was beautiful, but the house we lived in, it was hell. It was hell. It really was. The house we lived in, it was a old cabin that somebody had. It had a wraparound porch, and somebody had enclosed the porch around it. So now it's like one big room, and then you have this room going around it with like the kitchen and what would have maybe been a living room, and then another area in the bathroom. It was terrible, but there's holes in the ceiling. Like you can look up and see the sky. My father, he put a tarp up there so it wouldn't rain on our heads, but that didn't really work out when it was raining because it still rained on our heads. You can look up, see all the joists, rafters, there's rats everywhere. We had rats the size of, like, I got bit by a rat. So we were poor. Long story short, we were really, really poor. My father was an alcoholic. I think he spent probably all our money on beer and whatnot, but I think even if he wasn't an alcoholic, things still would have been really bad. I learned about my father's abuse, some of it when I was younger, but also I learned about it when I was older as well because I was trying to figure out, what the fuck happened to me? And so when you're trying to figure out what happened to you, you have to go on this journey, and I had to ask a lot of questions, not of my father. I asked my mother, I asked my father's family, and they all had different things to tell me. And once they told me, it made a lot of sense. My father starved me. Food. Like, he starved me in a lot of ways, but food is one way, and I mean starving. Like, I was outside eating bugs, eating plants. In the wintertime, there's not a lot to eat outside, so I was eating dog food. Sometimes one of our dogs, they'd kill a chipmunk, and I'd get to eat a chipmunk. Every couple of days, I did get a bowl of white rice. I had 2 older sisters. They went to school, so I guess they ate breakfast and lunch at school. They ate during the week, and I was the youngest. They're 2 and 3 years older than me. So I spent most of my time outside just looking for food or trying to like stay hidden away from my father because he was abusive in a lot of ways. Not just, he didn't just starve me. He was physically and sexually abusive, but he was also really explosive. He had this explosive anger, like you just had to hide from, you had to be silent, you had to stay out of his way because you didn't know like what was gonna happen to you if he noticed you. So you didn't want to get noticed. And my mom, she was given to him when she was 14 years old and he was 24. And I say given because her parents drove her from Michigan to Florida where my father was at. And while they were driving down there, her mother told her that they're all going down there, but one of them isn't coming back. And that happened to be my mother. And my mother had been getting sexually abused by her own father, and her own mother was jealous of her because I guess, her husband that she loved wanted his own daughter. And so her mother was extremely abusive towards her because of that jealousy. Like she'd dress her in Goodwill clothes or her dad's old baggy clothes, and my mother's siblings would get to wear brand new clothes from the mall. She'd give my mom cold showers all the time, like purposely. She treated my mom like the house slave. It was bad for my mom, and her mother just wanted to get rid of her, I guess so she could have her husband back. And so she was given away to my dad. And my dad turned out to be worse than her own father, but so my mom didn't know anything better for many, many years. So she went from her parents' house to my dad, and he's even worse than her own father. But she's married to this man now, and she thinks that she can't leave him because she's married to him, and she thinks that she just can't get away. She has no other option. She has to stay married. So they came back to Michigan about a year after they'd been married, and she asked her mom to help her leave. She said, "I want to leave him." And her mother told her, "No, you can't leave him," because at the time she was pregnant with my oldest sister. And she said, if you leave him, then the baby is going to be born with her father's name, her father's last name. And she didn't want, she's like, what are people going to say if your baby's born with, with your last name? It needs to have, my father's last name, not her own father's last name. And so, my mom had to stay with him. And then when she had my middle sister, there were still rumors that my middle sister was fathered by her own father. There was nothing she could do to fight those rumors. So if that doesn't tell you what was going on, with my mom and her dad, her dad, he was a real piece of work as well. I guess I'll get around to him. But so my mom, back to that, so she went from the abuse that she experienced with her own father, her own mother, to my father. And it stunted her growth emotionally. The way I said I would hide when my father was around, my mother would do the same thing. She would run around when she could hear his car coming up the driveway when he was coming back from work. She'd run around the house, race around and hide in closets and dive under clothes. She'd hide behind this big mirror that we had that stood up. She would hide like a child. And this was his wife that was hiding from him. Sometimes she would shit herself. A grown woman hiding from her husband, afraid. That's what he did. That's how he terrorized us, though. That's how scary he was. So yeah, my mom was always hiding and quiet. She didn't speak. It was like she was a ghost most of the time because she wasn't there for me. I don't understand now, but when I was a kid, I didn't understand why she was so quiet, why she didn't want to talk, why she didn't hug me, why she didn't kiss me. And, I found out, I was there, I witnessed her abuse. My clearest memory that I have is not something I saw, but something I heard. But I had seen it enough, but I heard it the most. It was when it was at night and I would be asleep. I slept on this couch that we had in our kitchen. I didn't have my own room. It was just a cot by the door in the kitchen. And I would listen to my mom begging my father to hit her. His name is Jesse. So she would say, "Hit me, Jesse. Just hit me already. Hit me. Hit me. Hurry up. Just go ahead and do it." And that's what I would hear. Like when I'm trying to go to sleep and my mom is begging and crying for him to hurry up and hit her, because he would have this Bible and she'd be on her knees kneeling in front of him on these hardwood floors, and he would just, read from this Bible all this bullshit. Sorry, I don't believe in God. Just a bunch of bullshit from this Bible. And my mom would have to kneel in front of him and listen. And after the hours of lectures, he would always beat her afterwards. But she didn't want to sit there and kneel. She didn't want to go through the lectures. So she would say, hurry up, beat me. And I get it now, you just want to get it over with. But my dad had to go through his whole thing, where he lectured her and told her how evil she was and, called her a slut and a whore and a bitch. And she had to listen to all that before she got beat. So that I would listen to that. I would listen to her begging him. I would listen to him beat her. And when I heard that, he had these drumsticks that he liked to beat her over the head with because he was also a musician. And, the pitch of her scream would change when he would start to beat her with those. And I remember that. It was so clear. And then I remember what it sounded like when he would begin to rape her. And how after a while she would just grow quiet. And all you could hear was the slap of skin on skin. And when I heard that, I was like 4, 5, 6, and 7. That was like a nightly thing, where my father would beat my mother damn near unconscious. And that's had a toll on her as well. I'll talk about that later. My father, he was abused as well. I found out that when he was an adolescent, I'm actually not sure how old, but he was taken to live with his grandmother. And he had an aunt there as well. And his aunt starved him and kept him tied up. And when he would say that he was hungry, she would force him to perform oral sex on her. And when I found that out, there was other things, other abuses, but that one specifically, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense of what happened to me. Okay, so the starving wasn't just because we were poor or anything like that. My father starved me, because that's what happened to him. That's how he was abused. And, when people teach you how to be terrible, that's what you learn. And so that's what he learned. Things were pretty bad for a long time. My sisters, I had two sisters, a middle sister and the oldest sister. And he kept us separated. And in a way, they were allowed to go to school. I really didn't go to school. And he beat me, broke my bones, my nose, my ribs. He starved me. And I don't know what happened before I was born, but I always felt like the sexual abuse that I went through was maybe worse than what happened to them, but I don't know, because I was too young to know. There was some things that happened where he was sexually abusing me and my sisters together, but those things that happened never seemed as bad as what he did when it was just me and him alone. So yeah, when I was growing up, it was hell, in a really beautiful place. It was so beautiful. I got to see Lake Michigan so much. We didn't have any running water in our house because the pipes froze one winter, so we would actually go bathe in Lake Michigan and get buckets of water from there and carry them back to the house so we could flush the toilet. Like, I know every time I was bathing out of a bucket, it was water from Lake Michigan. Grew up rough. I mean, the house was so thin, like the walls, no insulation. We had this kerosene heater. We had dogs. The dogs helped keep me warm at night. I had a dog. His name was Storm. He was a good dog. You know, he used to warn me when I was in the woods. He would warn me if my father was nearby. You know, so I could hide a little deeper. He was a good dog until my father killed him right in front of me. It was more of that explosive anger, like you never know, you know, when he's gonna lash out, what he's gonna do. And that was pretty horrific. It takes a long time to beat a dog to death. It does, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So I remember sitting there on my couch, my bed, whatever. It was a couch, but it was my bed. And sitting there and curled up, and my dad, the dog is tied up to the kitchen table, because remember my couch was in the kitchen, and you know, he's beating my dog with his broomstick until he breaks his back. But he's still alive. And so my dad unchains him and picks him up and takes both of his front legs and just like a what is that, like a wishbone, a turkey? You know what you do? Yeah, so he did that. And after that, I was pretty much alone, because I told you my mom didn't hug me. My sisters didn't pay attention to me. You know, they just liked to get me in trouble. There was this separation that he caused between us, where my sisters, they like to go tell him I did something when I didn't do it, so they could just watch me get beat. Like, he liked to, I guess, have them as like spies or something. I don't know what it was. I still don't understand, I guess, that part of it. But there's enough that I do understand now. So since my dog was dead, and that was like, you know, I guess the only comfort I had when I was a kid, the only thing that kept me warm, you know, he couldn't really hug me, but he would cuddle with me. And so I knew something. I knew that, you know, there was warmth in the world. It wasn't as bad as where I was with him in hell. I just had to get out of there. And eventually, when I was 7, my mom left him. And let me tell you, by the time I was 7, it was too fucking late. It was too late. She should have left him before I was born, or never been with him at all. I don't know what should have happened, but it was too late for me to have a chance. So she left him. We went to this place called the Safe Shelter. It was a shelter for battered women, and we were there for a couple months. We got an apartment in this town called South Haven. And now remember, I didn't really go to school. I was in no condition to go to school. Like, I was starving. I was constantly full of bruises. I didn't even have clothes to fit me. the couple of times I went to school, I would dress in my older sister's clothes, but they were 2 and 3 years older than me, and plus I was really undersized for my age because I was so skinny. And so when I started going to school after my mom left my dad, they quickly found out that I did not know how to read, and I didn't know anything. Matter of fact, when I was, they didn't even think I spoke English. They put me in this group with like the English second language kids, and I guess they didn't understand that I speak English perfectly. I just don't speak because I spent many years not speaking and just trying to be quiet. I had a lot of conversations with myself in my head during that time, but I never spoke out loud to somebody, so I wasn't even used to using my voice. So at this time, I'm like 8, still can't read, but I'm like enthralled with the world. All this food, like I remember the first time we went to the safe shelter. I remember the first time opening up the pantry door at this shelter, and it was like full of Captain Crunch and peanut butter and all this food that I'd never seen before, never had before. And so I spent a lot of time when I was 8 just looking at food, thinking about food, eating food, just, I didn't really care about anything else. I didn't think about what I had been through with my father because it was so, like the contrast, it was just so starkly different from what I was living now, because now I'm here with my mom and my sisters. Nobody's beating me up, nobody's raping me, nobody's touching me, and I'm going to school, I'm normal, I'm around all these normal kids. So when I was 8, I really didn't think about what had just happened to me, like the hell we just left behind. And it started to creep in over the years. When I was around 9, by the time I was 9, I had learned how to read, and I was actually put in this group with gifted and talented children, all avant-garde. It was just me and 2 other boys, that was it. So I went from not knowing how to read to being above the top of the class. And so I did focus on school, my schoolwork, but everything else was a fucking mess. I didn't have any friends. I ended up getting bullied a lot. And the memories of what I had been through, started to creep back in when I was 9. And that was when I started to act out. My mom, right away, she was never home. She'd be gone day and night. She had 2 jobs. And she would just come home and leave me and my sisters a bunch of money, cash. So I'm 9 years old. I got $300 in my pocket. And I don't know when my mom is going to come home again. And I can just do whatever I want. I don't have to come home. If I don't come home, nobody's there to care. My sisters, because of the way my dad had separated us when we were with him, they didn't pay attention to me. I was 8 years old. They were 10 and 11. They went to different schools. They had their own friends. They didn't give a shit. I knew if I didn't go home for 3 days, there was nobody at home to miss me, to know I was gone. I remember one time when I was 9, I had packed my things and I'm running away. So I ran away to this park on the other side of town, and I was yeah, I'm gonna sleep here tonight. And then this guy ended up following me, actually. It was dark night down the street anyways, but I had decided that, what the fuck am I running away for? There's nobody at home. Who's gonna notice? I have no reason to run away. But I guess, I was trying to run away from those memories and from myself, and just from being alone all the time. I guess, and that's where the trouble started, because I was left with all this, I guess, aftermath, and I was just alone. They didn't know what was going on with me at school, because I went to school and I did my work, and I was actually, like I said, the top of the class. So they're not bothering with me, what's wrong with her, or anything. And when I wasn't doing my work, I was reading a book. I loved to read. I didn't talk to anybody. And, but outside of school, I was a mess. Like, my mom started leaving things around the house. Like, she'd leave a half-smoked joint, leave some cigarettes. She'd, leave a drink. And when I was a kid with my dad would make me take a couple hits of his joint. When I was like 5, 6, 7, he liked it, and he would get mad if I didn't. And sometimes his friends would come around, and he would like it, if I smoked for them too. And my mom, she started leaving stuff around, and well, shit, I knew what to do with it. I remember the first little sleepover I got invited to. I was only there about an hour before I lit the joint up, and I'm like, does anybody want to hit? And I'm like, 9. I got kicked out right away. I didn't know. I had never spent a lot of time around other kids. I didn't know how to be a kid. I was never a kid. I can't say I was ever a child. I always knew too damn much about everything. And so then I started hanging out with older kids, because the older kids were into what I was into. And also, I had money too. My mom would leave me with all this cash. And so it started a series of just events of just getting into more and more trouble outside of school, and then going to school and acting like I was just fine and doing my work. And I started to get bullied at school, I think for 4th grade and then 5th grade. And then, all that anger that I had been holding in, I got tired of getting bullied. So one day I was walking to school when I was in 5th grade, and this girl had been bullying me like the entire year. And it was stuff that, she shouldn't have bullied me, first of all, but one of the things she said that really got to me was, she told everybody not to be my friend because I smelled bad. And I had problems at that time with, I didn't want to smell bad. I actually wanted to be clean, but I had problems with taking off my clothes or taking a shower. Like, it was hard. It was really hard because of my father and the things that he had done and the ways that he had abused me. And so after my mom left him, nobody cared about nobody cared. So it doesn't matter if I don't take a shower, because there's nobody at home telling me to take a shower. And thank you. So, but how could my bully know that? She didn't know. She didn't know why I smelled. She didn't know, why I didn't change my clothes or anything like that. She didn't, these kids, it's like they don't know what's going on with other kids and in their home life, and for a lot of children, it's hard for them to imagine, anything different than what they are going through at their own home. They think everybody's got a dad like them, so on and so forth. And so it's hard. So I got tired of being bullied in 5th grade, and I guess that's also when I started to get angry. Maybe it started the year before that, but that's when it really took off, because I guess the year before that I remember an incident where my mother had came home. This was when I was in 4th grade. She came home, and she was mad at me for something, and I was being a brat. I was. And she ended up slapping me across my face. And it was the first time she had hit me or laid hands on me or done anything since we left my father. And when we were with my father, she never hit me. So this was like a big deal because we all knew what we had left. And so it's like nobody's going to be hitting anybody around here. Like, that's crazy, considering where we just came from. And she slapped me, and she slapped the mess out of me. And at that time, I'd been eating a lot, so I was a lot taller now. I wasn't so slim. And I was taller than my mom at that point. She's small. She's like 5 foot. So when I was in 4th grade, I was probably like 5'1". And she slapped me, and I slapped the shit out of her. I knocked her down. And I remember standing over her, and I said, after Daddy, nobody's ever going to hit me again and get away with it. And so back to my bully. I got tired of being bullied. And so one day I was walking to school, and I was like, I'm tired of this shit. And it happened to be a day when everybody was inside for recess because it was raining that morning. And so when it was raining, all the kids were always gathered in the auditorium to wait for school to start. And there my bully was, sitting in the front row in front of everybody. And I was like, this is perfect. Because that's also, I don't know, I always felt like if I did something, I wanted to do it for everybody to see. I wanted it to be like the last time I had to do it. Like, everybody pay attention, because this is what happens. And yeah, she was sitting in the front row with her friends, and I like walked in there in front of the whole school because everybody was in there, and I just beat her up. Like, I jumped on her. It was crazy. And then, but after that, it kind of like sparked something in me where I kind of just, after that, I couldn't see her without putting my hands on her, without punching her in the face, without, I remember her being on the floor, and I'm just like banging her head into the floor at school. I couldn't keep my hands off of her. She'd been bullying me for like 1.5 years, and I guess all that pent up anger that I had towards my father, I took it out on her. And I remember at the time I thought I was sane, but I guess I went a little psychotic because I wanted to check up on her all the time. I ended up joining her church group to make sure she was being good, treating everybody nice. She was so scared. I ended up following her home. She lived on the other side of town, but she walked home from school. I ended up following her home. I'd stand outside across the street under her window so she could see me. Like, I made sure she knew that I was watching her. I just didn't want her bullying anybody else the way she had bullied me. And then I guess things started to get out of hand at school. They started to notice, like, what's up with you? What's going on? Why don't you leave her alone? And I didn't tell them what had been going on with my dad. I just said I wanted to kill myself because that's how I felt when I was, 4th and 5th grade. I guess the anger didn't just start to creep in, the depression did as well. And so that was my first trip to the mental hospital before 5th grade ended. I was at Pine Rest in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I honestly don't have much to say about it, except they didn't help me. They didn't help me. I felt like I just got stuck in there, and no one tried to figure out what was wrong with me. Shit, I don't even know if they asked. I think they just put me on medication and had me doped up. And then I get back to school before the end of the year of 5th grade, and they put me in this class with only 3 other students in it. It was the emotionally impaired class. They called it the bad kids class. And things, my things got even more out of control after that. I got this reputation of being, a fighter, being the violent one. And my oldest sister, she had a reputation. It was 14, and she was already the town whore. So that leads me to suspect that there was more sexual abuse than what I knew about that happened to her. And my middle sister, she was a quiet one. So we had the whore, the quiet one, and I was the violent one. And when my mom left my dad, she just divorced him. She didn't say we were abused. She didn't say anything. So he got visitation rights. And back then, you could leave the state if you didn't want to pay child support. But those visitation rights were still in place. So at the end of 5th grade, me and my 2 sisters got sent to stay with him on a Greyhound bus all the way down in Alabama, where he had moved to this single wide trailer. And every night, I was 9. I had started getting my menstrual cycle when I was 8. I've read that it happens, sometimes it happens for girls younger when they've been sexually abused. So I was pretty young to have been getting my menstrual cycle at that point, but I was 9 when I went to go visit him in Alabama with my 2 sisters, and my 2 sisters slept in a bedroom together on a full-size bed. And my dad, he made me sleep with him every night. And I remember one night I didn't want to do it anymore. And so before bed, my sisters were already in bed, but I went to try to lay down with them instead and asked them to scoot over, and they wouldn't make any room for me. And they just laid there. They wouldn't speak to me, and they just stared at the ceiling. And I'm trying to shove myself in between them because I really, really don't want to go sleep with my dad. And my dad comes in the room and, asks me what I'm doing. He sees I'm trying to lay down with him. He pulls me out from between them, and he starts beating me on the floor, right there. And my sisters are just there, just staring at the ceiling, not moving, not saying anything. So we stayed with him from the first week of June, mid-June, and then up until the first week of August. And when I came back to Michigan, at the end of that visit, I was pregnant. And I was pregnant with my father's child when I was 10 years old. But I had been seeing an older boy before that. I was, promiscuous, but we had been using a condom. So I knew it was my father's. And I told him, I told the older boy that I was pregnant by him, so he would think that it was his child, because I didn't know what to do. But I knew that if I told him, he would figure something out. And he did. He got angry, like I knew he would. And he had 2 of his friends hold me by my arms while he beat me until I started to bleed and, beat the baby out of me. And so I didn't have my father's child. That was the only way I could see of solving that problem, because who am I going to tell? What am I going to say? I tried telling my mom when I was down there. I called her, and I didn't say anything specific. I just said, "Mommy, Daddy's being really bad. Can we come back home, please?" And she was like, "No, it's court ordered. You have to stay down there." And I was just like, "Okay." What do you do? You're 10 years old. My dad's trailer was in the middle of nowhere in Alabama. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then when I get back, I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. So now I'm back in Michigan. And thank God I lost that baby. So my life probably would have been even worse. But one of my sisters, my oldest sister had a boyfriend, and his cousin, he ended up sexually assaulting me right after that. So I'm still 10 at this point. And I was really messed up, like hickeys, bruises, like choked me, the whole 9 yards. And then school started. Hooray, I'm going to 6th grade now. And like, this has been my life, and you want me to sit here in this class with these kids and act like I give a shit about what anybody is talking about, when I really don't. I just want to die. Like, that's all I want to do. I really don't care about anything else. And I also, I don't know if you remember, I said like my schoolwork never fell behind. I was always at the top of my class. So 6th grade was starting, and I'm like, I don't want to go to 6th grade. I honest to God don't. Like, there's nothing for me to do there. I'm just going to sit there and do what? Like, I'm just going to be bored. Like, I know all these things already. And so I didn't want to go to school. And so the truant officer started to pick me up to go to school. And, but they wouldn't let me go to any classes because they said I was a danger to the other kids, a danger to the other students, because I had built that reputation for myself, where I was just angry and I would lash out. And so they would stick me in this conference room right off of the main office. And I would just spend my day in there. They wouldn't give me any schoolwork or anything. The truant officer would pick me up, I guess just make sure I was in the school building. That meant I wasn't skipping. And so I ended up lighting a fire in that room because I guess I was bored. I wanted to get out of there. Like, I didn't want to be there anymore. So, and they kept the door locked. And this boy that was also a troubled kid, he was working in the office as an office aide, but I think just so they could keep an eye on him. He ended up unlocking the door and letting me out, and they knew there was a fire, and I fucking left. I ran home, and it was a long walk. And the truant officer didn't come pick me up anymore after that. I guess we're just gonna leave her at home. And so after about a month later, we're into like early October of what should have been my 6th grade year. We get a letter in the mail, we got a court date. So me and my mom, we go to court, and I'm 10 years old at this time, and I don't know why the judge asked me, but he asked me. He was like, do you want to go back home, or do you want to go into foster care? And I'm like, I want to go into foster care, because fuck it, it's not working out here. Like, I need a change of scenery, like big time. And I'm like, it probably sounds better. And like, they took me away because they said, not because of what I had done at the school, but because of neglect. They said my mother was neglecting me because she was just not home, not around to make sure I was going to school or whatever. She wasn't around for anything. But she definitely, she wasn't around, which she was going through her own shit, and I didn't understand until I was a lot older. At that time, my mom wasn't around, and everybody around me thought like I was the coolest kid because, I had all this money, I could do whatever I wanted, and there was no one to say anything. So everybody was like, your mom's so cool. And I would watch all their moms like telling them it's time to come in the house, and or telling them they can't hang out with me. Like, nobody wanted their children around me. But I wanted that. I wanted a mom that was gonna, say it's time to come in the house, or you can do this or you can't do that. But my mom she never did any of that. I always was allowed to do whatever I wanted. And it came with a lot of trouble, because who's going to leave, life decisions in the hands of a child? So when the judge asked me that, I'm like, I don't know if my answer had any weight in what he decided, but he did decide right then and there, you're going to foster care, and that's what happened. So all of a sudden, I'm being taken to my first foster home, and my new caseworker is going to my house to get me this one of those single load washer, like a laundry basket. Yeah, single load laundry basket. She put some of my clothes in it. So now I'm in my new foster home. This is my new life, and I have a basket of clothes with me. Like this is what I have now. And I was really the depression that I was going through at that time, I was 10, it was really heavy. And I was angry. I was so angry. And I started going to school in my new town, my new foster home, and they ended up putting me in 7th grade, which I was happy about. And my new school principal, she had called me into her office and looked at all my records, and she's like, "You're so smart, da, da, da." And she was like, and I told her what happened. I was like, "I quit going to school because I didn't want to go to 6th grade." And she was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to go to high school." And she was like, "How about tomorrow when you come to school, you'll be in 7th grade?" And I'm like, "Why?" "I want to go to high school." And she said, "You're smart enough, but your maturity level is not there." And I shut the fuck up. Because I knew, even when I was that old, I knew that I was messing up. I knew that I couldn't have anything nice because I would just screw it up. So I was happy I was in 7th grade now, but now I'm in foster care. I have no family, but that's nothing new because I didn't have any family before. And people get this notion about foster care that when a kid is sent to foster care, oh, now they're taken care of. Like we can just forget about them. But that's not what happened to me. It wasn't a solution. If I hadn't already been traumatized by my own father and everything I'd been through, like foster care would have traumatized me, like extremely. I felt like it was put on me as a kind of punishment. Everything felt like a punishment. I was on probation while I was in foster care for setting that fire at the school. And anytime I violated my probation, I had to get locked up. And there was terms to it, like I had to take my medication or I'm going to get locked up. I can't get kicked out of school or I'm going to get locked up. And so I used that to move houses. When something was going bad in one of my foster homes, when maybe my foster dad was a little too handsy or something, or my foster mom was, I would get in trouble. I'd go to school and beat somebody up just so I could get suspended, because that would break my my probation, which meant I would have to go to court and I would have to get locked up. Every time I messed up my probation, I automatically got locked up for 3 months. And so I knew that after getting locked up, I would get to go to a new home. So that's what I would do when nobody would listen to me about needing to move. Sometimes I would tell my caseworkers, I need to get the fuck out of here. And they wouldn't listen, so then I would go to school and act crazy. And then I would get locked up, and when I got locked up, I would act even crazier. As soon as I got locked up, the day I would walk in there, I'd pick out who I knew was, I don't know, maybe somebody that might think that they could bully me, and I would pick that person out. And I would beat them up. And it's not just beating somebody up, it's what my father taught me. He didn't show any remorse. He wasn't afraid to hurt you. So that made me a different kind of fighter when I would fight, because I wasn't afraid to hurt anybody. I'm not afraid to go for your neck, your eyes, your head. And I noticed right away when other kids fought they would be afraid to really hurt somebody. And so I would do that. I would go after somebody. And right away I'd get put in solitary confinement for 10 days. And then when you come out of solitary, they won't let you interact with the general population right away. Like if you eat with them, you got to eat with your back to them, like they're facing the table, your back's to them. You put your tray, right here, and you sit there and you're just not a part. You're not welcomed yet. But when they would let me out of solitary, I'd usually jump on somebody else within the first hour and beat them up too. And then I would get put back into solitary for another 10 days. And then when they'd let me out, everything would be fine. Just give me a book, I'll read, I love The Count of Monte Cristo. You guys have a copy of that? Because I always needed to establish the fact at first that, like, I wanted people to think I was crazy. Like, don't fuck with me, I'm crazy. I wasn't crazy at all, but I used it, I guess, to protect myself. My mother, I found this out recently, she did the same thing with my father. She would act crazy with him on purpose to make him stop hurting her. If she knew that he was gonna hurt her, do something to her, she'd run away. One time she burned her arm with an iron. I remember one time I was maybe 4 or 5 and she came out of the bedroom and her arm was just bloody and dripping and she had jeans wrapped around it. And my dad's like, come look and see what your mother did. Look at what she did. So she's coming into the kitchen, dripping blood, and I'm walking in there and I look at her and she's just dripping blood and I'm like, and my dad's just screaming at me to look at her. And I asked my mother about that recently and she told me, no, she wasn't trying to kill herself. She was trying to protect herself from my father, because when she would start acting crazy and she would hurt herself, my father would leave her alone. He would feel bad and she wouldn't have to go through whatever the hell he had planned for her. And so that was her defense. And it became my defense when I was in foster care and when I would get locked up. I mean, I was never crazy. I just had to act crazy to protect myself. And it worked. But also when that's how you act all the time, the type of energy you put out is what you're gonna receive back. Some people, started treating me like I was crazy and like I was just unreachable. No adult in my life was gonna be able to reach me, so I just kept getting tossed around to worse and worse homes. I had a file this thick. Whatever foster parents took me had to read that first before they decided to take me in. And it came with more money, so it wasn't the nicer homes that took me in. It was the worst ones that took me in, that wanted the money. When I went into foster care, my sisters didn't go. It was just me. They got to stay home with my mom. But a couple of years after I went in, my sisters were older at the time when they went in. They were 16 and 17. And my oldest sister, she got married to her boyfriend right away so that she didn't have to be in foster care. And my middle sister, she got adopted by a nice white family, put braces on her teeth, took her shopping at the mall, loved her, hugged her. She graduated from the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor. So she turned out all right, but I guess because she was an all right kid. I mean, she didn't act crazy. But I ended up slipping through the cracks, I guess, in the system because I had to act crazy to get through it.